Good evening. I want to start out by saying that this is not my story, but God's ongoing story that He is still writing. It's not about what I have done, but everything God has done for me. I was born on November 7th, 2000 into sin. My family moved from Oakland to Fresno at the age of 1, which was a huge blessing for me because of our large extended family and my grandparents that were here in town. My parents bought a house in the Fig Garden neighborhood, and we still live there to this day. I was the firstborn of 3. My parents were far from perfect, but did the very best they could with what they had. My mom came from a lot of emotional trauma, which does not surprise me at all that she struggles with codependency. She has had to deal with a life of parents who've been manipulative and emotionally checked out, as well as having to deal with a brother who has a lifelong substance abuse disorder. My father was raised Catholic and came from a large extended family in Fresno. Although it's very difficult to talk about recovery with my parents, they still accept the Lord and attend church, and I honor that. I can say that through this program, I've been able to open up the most vulnerable sides of my life and truly express those darkest feelings that I would not have shared elsewhere. With all that being said, growing up, I was very close with my grandparents and my extended family in town, and we always got together on holidays. I also grew up in the church and immediately found it difficult to fit in and saw church as a punishment. I grew up at a church that was a smaller commuter church and that I didn't really have any friends or interest in pursuing faith. I only did the minimum and avoided church as much as possible. I really lived for those Sundays where I had a weekend full of sports and could not make it to church, which my family did accommodate for. Hang on, wait. I'm going to start over again because I think I forgot to introduce myself. Okay. I want to start out by saying that this is not my story, but God's ongoing story that He is still writing. It's not about what I've done, but everything that God has done for me. So my name is Scott. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus, and I struggle with codependency, sexual purity, and mental health, and many other things. So I was born on November 7th, 2000 into sin. My family moved from Oakland to Fresno at the age of 1, which was a huge blessing for me because of our large extended family and my grandparents who lived in town. My parents bought a house in the Fig Garden neighborhood and still live there to this day. I was the firstborn of 3. My parents were far from perfect, but they did the best they could with what they had. My mom came from a lot of emotional trauma, which does not surprise me at all that she struggles with codependency. She's had to deal with a life of parents who've been manipulative and emotionally checked out, as well as having to deal with a brother who has had a lifelong substance abuse disorder. My dad was raised Catholic and came from a large extended family in Fresno. Although it's very difficult to talk about recovery with my parents, they still accept the Lord and attend church, and I honor that. I can say that through this program, I've been able to open up the most vulnerable sides of my life that I would not have opened up about elsewhere. With all that being said, growing up, I was very close with my extended family and my grandparents, and we always got together on holidays. I also grew up in the church and immediately found it difficult to fit in and saw church as a punishment rather than a place of refuge. I grew up in a church that was smaller and more of a commuter church, and I didn't really have any interest in pursuing faith, and I didn't really have any friends either. I only did the minimum and avoided the church as much as possible, and I really lived for those Sundays where I had a weekend full of sports and could not make it to church, which my family did accommodate for. By the time middle school rolled around, my parents did not require me to attend youth group events, which I elected not to do. Whenever I was invited to another youth group, I turned it down. Growing up, I found comfort in following in my dad's footsteps and many other relatives' footsteps as well into sports, specifically baseball. I was not a naturally good athlete, and it felt like I just had that natural drive and passion that made myself good even when I started late. Same thing with running. Starting off, I was slow, but that raw passion just made me faster. My freshman year of high school, I had never played soccer before and just showed up to tryouts, worked really hard, and I made the team. With all those athletic thrills, I ended up finishing my high school career playing varsity baseball as a pitcher who threw sidearm and embraced my role on the team as a closer. When I was 8, my mom was pregnant with my youngest sister and told my middle sister and I that the baby would have Down syndrome and have to have open heart surgery early on. We didn't know what that meant at the time, but we hoped for the best. Fast forward to January 5th, 2010, she had to be born prematurely, 8 weeks early, and from day one was sent to Valley Children's Hospital. I don't think us siblings met her until she was almost 2 months old because the hospital did not allow children under 12 access. Within the first few months of her life in the hospital, she had at least 5 surgeries. During the time of my parents being gone a lot, my grandparents really started to step in and take care of us for a while, which I'll forever be grateful for. My youngest sister first came home right before her open heart surgery was scheduled for June of 2010. We were told that she may not make it. However, the surgery was successful and she was able to come home and live a rather peaceful life for some time. Soon after, she developed breathing problems and started going in and out of the hospital. She even ended up at Stanford for some time, and that was some of the most difficult times for my family and I. With the respiratory problems still continuing on, she had to be trached and was on a ventilator as well. For those times she was home, we had a ventilator and 24-hour nursing staff at our house. It was always routine checkup, puffs, trach change, and if something was wrong in the middle of the night, back to the hospital. On New Year's Day 2014, my dad woke me up in the middle of the night and said, "We're going to the hospital. Your sister might die tonight." This was hard to believe, and like I had just woken up from a nightmare. At the hospital, we were told that she would live through the night, but it was not looking good. The next day, I was told that she would not live, and we would spend the very last moments in the hospital with her. On her first birthday, January 5th, 2014, my sister passed away. It was peacefully with all of us surrounding her. After my sister's death, it was very difficult to talk about, and I often avoided talking about it until recently. I felt like I was completely alone and no one knew what it was like to go through what I or my family had gone through, so I just kept it under the rug. Most people seemed to have no kind of sympathy for what we had gone through, and I was afraid to share my story and found many ways to cope. After my sister's death, my parents offered to put me in counseling, which I refused, and I also claimed atheism. I confessed to my parents that I no longer believed in God, and I could not believe in something that I could not see. At this time, I was looking to medicate and began looking to other gods like sex, money, social media, and porn. That's when I started with porn and found it through a movie that I was not supposed to watch and became hooked and began browsing sex and explicit content on a private browser. When it wasn't porn, I struggled with fantasizing different realities and refusing to truly believe deep down where I was and that I needed help. It seemed like everybody else had it better than me. Someone was wealthier, someone was better looking, someone had better grades, someone was better at sports, and someone got all the girls. In high school, I found it a struggle to fit in and always gravitated towards whatever was people-pleasing. It started with vaping, and then chewing tobacco, and then to getting high. I even went to a couple parties and had a considerable amount of hard liquor. By the grace of God, I was still able to make it home in one piece. Towards the end of high school, I had zero motivation, had okay grades, and somehow had a great SAT score, which got me into college, and I went away for a bit. I ended up at my all-time low in college because I was finally on my own and no one bossing me around, and I often found myself in my dorm room or playing my pastime cornhole by myself. I was randomly placed with a roommate who was a believer, and we went out one night and came across a church that was doing outreach with cornhole boards, which I had no option but to take up. I showed off my skills, and I was complimented and finally felt like I was being wanted by someone, and the fact that I felt alone. They then invited me to their Sunday church service, which I was hesitant because I was still a skeptic at the time, but took them up on it because I was open to community. I went and I kept coming back weeks in and weeks out, and I joined a small group, and I was still very skeptical. But finally, I heard a message that resonated with me at that point, and I gave my life to Christ. That was October 19th, 2019. After that, I ended up getting an emotional high, meaning that I found myself a little too happy and found friends to drink and party with. I would say that I was a Christian, but I lived a life where I drank, partied, got high, and chewed. I was a lost sheep who had no shepherd and no idea what it meant or what it was like to live a Christ-like life. Academically, I was suffering. I had no motivation to do anything and barely passed through the year. We were sent home as soon as COVID hit in 2020 and never came back, and I wanted to start working. The summer of 2020, I got a job working for a family member's agricultural spreading operation, where I operated one of the trucks and was met with 12 to 14-hour days, 6 days a week during the peak of season. I was met with a foreman who became extremely controlling, micromanaging, and verbally abusive. This took a toll on my overall well-being because I was always stressed about coming to work every single day and was just threatened by his presence. I refused to tell anyone because it was a family member's business, and I didn't want to make him disappointed in me for causing an unproductive season. At the end of the season, I got another job working for an alcohol distributor, which was a way of getting a commercial driver's license and consistent year-round income. I became really good at what I did really fast and obtained my commercial driver's license and a route rather quicker than most. Many of the coworkers didn't expect me to make it in the job, but I proved them all wrong. Shortly after taking the new job, I was pursued by a girl, and it really excited me because I didn't ever expect girls to pursue me. But it didn't work out. After that, to cope with the void that I was experiencing, I resorted to dating apps where I began several stints of inappropriate graphic relationships that turned into me being on the hook and bleeding out money because I had money now. Ever since coming home from school, I went to a young adults group that was far away and inconvenient because it was far from home and I wasn't able to attend very often. I eventually stopped going altogether. I never accepted invitations from my home church because I believed it lacked community and I didn't want to bring back childhood Sunday school vibes and me not liking church. 2022 was a rough year for me. It started with getting in a hit-and-run accident in a parking lot and me being the runner. I got caught, but thankfully I was able to pay up without charges. On April 23rd, 2022, I was at a company party at a Fresno Grizzlies game, and as a new 21-year-old at the time, I was ready to drink and party like never before. I had drink after drink until I had probably 18 to 20 drinks, and I don't remember the end of that night at all. But I woke up in the hospital and had severe alcohol poisoning, and they said that I could have died. After that, I was just crushed and shameful of that $3,500 price tag that I incurred for my own stupidity and I just couldn't control myself. By August of 2022, I was just done believing in God and not knowing how to follow him. I found a young adults group in Fresno, and I prayed that God would just meet me where I was at and give me exactly what I needed at the time. However, I ended up not sticking it out with that young adults group I went to, but I ended up finding a home in the same home church that I'd hated all those years growing up. I found the leaders to be very inviting, welcoming, and wanting to be friends. I started going to group regularly, church on Sunday, and my family seeing me there made them very proud. Soon after, I joined a Bible study and became very close with the people within the group. I became curious and started to speed read through a lot of the Bible. However, I still struggled to open up about a lot of what was going on behind closed doors. I still could not let go of my sexual desires and often relapsed and told myself that I was going to quit. My cover for that was often staying busy with work and money. In February of the following year, I went to a large annual conference called the Jubilee Conference with the young adults group in Pittsburgh. And I ended up getting very sick and found myself stuck in the hotel room. After I came back, I joined the audiovisual team at my home church, which turned me into that audiovisual tech that all you guys see back there today. This eventually led to a summer internship with the church, which included reading a book called The Heart of Technical Excellence, which emphasized the importance of details and pursuing what we do with excellence, not perfection. It really got me into the mindset of correcting the unnoticeable details, and that could unconsciously draw someone away and possibly an opportunity of giving their life to Christ. I also got to go on a meaningful serve and learn trip to Arizona to a Native American foster home, which I got to help clean around the property and got to interact with some of the kids as well as doing a devotional with them. I also started with a local thrift store joint that my friend had started for some of our unhoused neighbor population, where I learned my affinity for the kitchen and cooking. About a year and a half later, I was asked to cook for that same friend's wedding. With all this stuff going for me, I was struggling at work. I was getting tired of the work that I was doing and did not know what was next. I knew I was not going to be there forever, and I wanted to make more money eventually. It was one day in the summer of 2023, which I had lashed out in anger. It was over 100 degrees, and I had dropped a pallet on accident, and out of anger, slammed a case. Never thought I would get caught, but the following week, the customer called me in and said that they had everything on camera, and the spirit inside of me had been exposed. I sincerely apologized for the situation, but still held on to the shame for longer. So as time passes, I was notified of a possible opportunity to work with an individual with Down syndrome, something I had never thought that I would ever get into. For so long, I had completely neglected my sister's death and legacy, and I did not want anything to do with the community. I was hesitant for a while, but ended up taking the opportunity. And I have to say, I've been blessed ever since. Not only have I got to see a part of God's kingdom so wonderfully in action, but it has filled a long-lived void in my life that has made me feel like I'm with my sister and I'm serving a purpose greater than myself. In the beginning of 2024, recovery began chasing me down a rabbit hole. It started with a coffee meetup with my friend having a discussion about the accountability in his life and how it has helped him, and why I should get it too. Then a month later, I went to my second Jubilee conference in Pittsburgh and picked up a book titled Breaking the Idols of Your Heart. The book told a story of a man being unfaithful to his wife, had committed adultery in his heart, and almost threw away his marriage. The book really got me thinking about my own integrity and my position as a single man who wants to be married and the benefits on the other side. Then a couple months later, I was invited to hear a testimony at Celebrate Recovery which also affirmed that I needed to get help. After that, I joined the summer staff at my home church, which I was assigned to work with the 3rd through 5th grade cohort, which I never saw myself doing in a million years. Though that summer, I just felt like I was dragging myself, and I was burnt out, pouring into everyone else for so long and never myself. It was tough overall in terms of my sexual purity to be the only guy working within the children's ministry team. However, I did get a really great note from our children's minister at the end of the summer for putting in the work and taking the chance. A little bit into my new job, I began to forward about an aspiration of becoming a pilot, which I had long wanted but hid for a while. I was questioning whether my parents would support the idea because my mom was always the one to be against small planes and talk about how dangerous they were. Thankfully, they do support me through all of it, and I could not be more grateful. I found out that the first step in becoming a pilot is finding out if I'm medically qualified, which I ended up making an appointment for and came back with the results of, I cannot issue you a medical certificate because you have a history of hospitalization for alcohol poisoning. Sorry. This was not the news that I was looking for, but thankfully there was an opportunity to defer that to the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, and be able to plead my case. I made my first attempt, then months later, got a letter saying that I needed to provide more information. I began to feel super discouraged. I started looking for other options and had the mindset that this dream was over. One day I began to feel lifted up again about it and decided to put my application in again. Then about a month later, I got the information that I had been praying for, saying, "Congratulations, Scott, you are medically qualified." I took this as God's call to go for this opportunity and give it everything that I had. After 7 months of intense training, studying, and a check ride failure, I passed my private pilot check ride in June of 2025. I'm now building up hours and preparing for higher ratings. By August of last year, I was done with my tenure of summer staff and was just fed up and ready to do whatever I could to work on myself and seek real healing. I came through the doors and was immediately met with love and acceptance for my vulnerability in small groups. I immediately joined the step study group and was very intimidated at first because I was told that the biggest step is the inventory, and I have to be prepared to really get all those pieces of junk that I've carried for too long out. It was punctuated with, "This is where the boys and the men separate." However, with tremendous faith and encouragement from brothers, I made it through, and I can only attribute that to God. My inventory was the hardest step, but when I finished sharing with my sponsor, it was the most true joy I'd ever experienced. I felt lighter, and I knew that I had for far too long carried a burden that I was never meant to carry. Now, as I have mentioned, I'm 24 years young, and my recovery journey is far from over. But I am using my ongoing journey to make me a better friend, brother, son, and hopefully future husband, and hopefully future father. Although I still do fall short and give into temptation, I know that I can rely on this family to restore me, and I could say with 100% confidence that I am chosen, wanted, God's masterpiece, God's messenger, God's beloved child, and this is what defines me. To give a big highlight, I got my 1-year chip in June of 2025 to signify my 1-year anniversary of being porn-free. This past week, I got to co-lead the game station at my church's kids camp, known as City Bible Adventure. I really saw God's grace in action, and knowing my past did not define me in that very moment. I was wanted, I was loved, I was trusted, and I was one who was looked up to. To the newcomer, I promise that you will not regret walking through those doors when you walk out. If you put in the work, you will reap the benefits of the grace God offers you. Romans 8:1 says, "There is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus." Jesus himself says in Matthew 11:28 through 30, "Come to me, all who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light." Folks, this is an invitation from Jesus, the very one who died for you and took care of everything for you on the cross and put all of your weight on himself and walk lighter, and allows you to walk lighter. If you are in the right place. And as Pastor Ron says, if you work the steps, they work. Thank you for letting me share tonight.